Hello and welcome to another episode of Who Knew in the Moment, the podcast. I'm your host, Phil Friedrich, and today I'm honored to have Jordan Mederich with me. Jordan is the founder of DropFunnels, and as we talk about his story, he's accomplished so many different things. But one thing that I really loved about his story, and I think you're going to love as you hear it, is his focus on being a disruptor. So opposed to always sticking with the status quo, being willing to be a disruptor in your industry. So Jordo, thanks so much for being on today.
Thank you, Phil. I'm excited to be here, and thanks for everyone for tuning into this episode.
Yes, sir. Now, in your story, I always think it's interesting, how our early years oftentimes end up being formative and important in our later years. So, talk a little bit about growing up. I know your dad was a pastor, and so there's a little extra pressure when you're a pastor's kiddo. I can attest to that. So, talk a little bit about that in your life.
Yeah, I love that your show is all about how things inevitably lead to where you are, and even where we're at now, how it'll essentially build to where we end up going. But yeah, formative years for sure was very humble beginnings. Dad has been a pastor my whole life. My mom was a teacher, family of 7. So I always like to say that the silver spoon that we ate from, we got from Goodwill. So very humble beginnings and very much a servant's heart and leadership attitude is what they instilled in me at a very young age. But very similar to kind of like the rich dad, poor dad story. I also had a best friend who attended our church, and but they did very, very well for themselves. He was in the software space. I didn't even know what software really was or what it meant at the time. It was like pre-internet software.
Yeah.
And he actually designed some of the GPS routing systems for waste management so they could track trucks and be efficient with that, and sold it off for, a bajillion dollars, right? And so I got to go on cruises and trips with them and do all these things. And so I got to see two sides of a coin. One is a very servant heart. Everything that comes in goes right back out to serve other people. And that's really an entrepreneur's spirit as well, but you just don't get paid for it, right? You don't get the benefit. You're building for something bigger. And then this other side where they're great people, had the same integrous morals and upbringing and whatnot, but they got to enjoy the creature comforts. Like I think one of my first full outfits was always just like gifts or those types of things, versus like the other side of you can go out and just buy whatever you want, whenever you want. Right.
Yeah.
So between these two things, I very much created, I think, that a bit of a balance between the two of like truly wanting to serve and make a difference in the world. But at the same time, still be able to do fun things and to go experience fun things. So those two things very much added up to where I am today.
Yes. So as you're growing up, and you start evaluating colleges, something that has intrigued you or kind of caught your eye is in a production sense. And so when you get to college, you get the opportunity to start creating some commercials and things like that. So talk about where you went to college and beginning in creating commercials.
Sure. So I went to College of the Ozarks, which is in near Branson, Missouri.
Yeah.
And it's actually, I've always been a very frugal type. I love to live within my means. Even our company, DropFunnels today, I never took a penny of equity. I bootstrapped the whole thing to being a 7-figure brand. I'm very blessed for that, but it was built on some of those foundations of kind of like the rich dad, poor dad dichotomy, right? Is like, so that school, actually, you just worked your way through and you never pay tuition, and you graduate debt free.
Yeah.
So with that, I was very much like hustle and just bust your butt, get stuff done. So you had to work a job as well as working on campus, as well as going to school at the same time. So you learned a work ethic. In fact, they call it Hard Work U. That's the name.
Yeah.
Of the it's actually harder to get in there than it is Stanford or Harvard because of how many students that they reject. So it's actually really difficult to get in. So amazing place. And there I realized, when I was in school, I had this big light bulb moment. I actually went for theater. I was in the middle of a theater degree.
Okay.
I love theater. I love productions. I love putting on experiences for people. But then I realized there's no money in the creative world, right? That's not exactly the prime business model if you have entrepreneurial goals. So in college, I worked inside the yearbook department, and we produced the DVD for the end of the year and whatnot. And so while I did that, I realized, man, I've got to be able to start some kind of a business, try to create something to support myself. And I was dating the beautiful woman who ended up becoming my wife. So I was like, we need to create a life together and provide for that. And so I started a small video production company. And then I started it's kind of funny. I ended up creating a bunch of video contests. There's contests that brands have put on, 3M, Verizon, Nike, like some of these big brands.
Yeah.
And you would submit a video, you'd have to do it completely for free. It's on your dime. You submit this, and then they might buy it from you. And I failed and failed and failed and failed. I was like, man, I gotta win one of these things. And one day I won first place for a contest for 3M, and I got like $8,000, right?
Yeah.
Mind-blowing money for me for a college student.
Yeah.
And I was like, man, that paid my rent for 2 years or whatever it was at the time. So amazing experience learning some video production things. And even to this day, I'm not kidding, almost every day I'm still using video production or design things to add into what we're doing now. So it's very much snowballed.
Yeah. Now I want to highlight that, that memory right there of winning the 3M video production. And I think it can be easily glossed over, but the idea that you submitted time and time again and you didn't win, but you kept doing it, right? I think so many times there's people that think, oh, I want to get started in this, but then they don't see instant success or they don't have, the support. And so they give up before they even get the win that they needed to really give them the, motivation to keep going. So talk about that phase of life for you, kind of seeing the rejections, but just continuing and forging on regardless.
Well, I think anyone, and I would consider myself an entrepreneur, and I love helping people who are either starting or growing their entrepreneurial journey. But it is the number one skill set I think to learn is how to get beat up well and how to resurface from that. And so what I think the shift for me was changing from when I lose, I failed and it's a reflection on me, instead of, no, it just didn't go exactly what I expected. And how do I carry that off into the next thing? It's no reflection of me personally. It's just an event. It's like if I get into a car accident with someone, it's a bad event for me physically. It might hurt. It doesn't mean I'm a bad person. It doesn't mean that I've failed at life. It means, okay, a thing happened. That's it. It's a thing. So yeah, when I was losing, a lot of these competitions, just honing in my chops and trying to get better at it, and probably 27 contests or something like that. And each one would take 2 to 3 weeks of work. And like you'd invest in it and you'd hire in friends and you'd beg them to help you with all this stuff. And like, I just never stopped. I said, look, I'm just going to do this. And I'm not attached to an outcome. I'm attached to the process of getting great, because when you become great, then you get the outcome. Right. So leading versus lagging indicators. So for me, I failed enough times to eventually break through. And I think that that's the key. And to this day, every single day I fail. Like I always like to say, I fail more than most people combined. And I will continue failing. And I don't take that as a personal mark on my identity. I'm not a failure. It's not who I am. So an event can't dictate or change that. So for me, I like to build on that. Even expecting to fail, I think, is powerful. It's probably a really dangerous, but also powerful connotation to have in your mind is, if I'm willing to fail or even expecting that failure will happen, you're not surprised when it occurs and it doesn't crush you, because you're like, yeah, that's par for the course. You go knock on 100 doors, maybe 20 of them will open it, and then 10 of them, they're going to slam in your face. So if you're saying, no, I need to go sell to 100 of these doors, you're going to get beat up pretty bad. But it's like, well, I'm not there to coddle myself after the slamming of 10 doors. I'm there to serve one person. Right. Yes. So I'm going to go knock on 100 to get one. Right.
Yes.
And that, I think it's a different perspective.
And I think that's so powerful. Managing expectations, right? So I played basketball my whole life. So as dumb as it sounds, I can pretty much correlate anything in my life back to basketball. And to your point, the thing I always think about is the best shooters in the world. Every time Steph Curry goes to shoot the ball, he has the confidence that it's going in. But to your point, in the back of his mind, he also knows there's a 0% chance I'm going to go 100% tonight. So the second he misses a shot, it's not any detriment or negative self-talk to his next shot. It's just like, all right, that was one of the ones I was going to miss. Now I just got to keep shooting because there's more makes that are out there to be had. And I think, to your point, we oftentimes come in with a mindset of, well, I should make, every sale, right? Or this should go well. And then, to your point, if I don't have a understanding that not each interaction is going to go exactly how I want it, it can be detrimental to our mindset.
Oh boy, that is super powerful. I hope everyone can take that as an internal note, that living in should is probably it's just so like self-defeating. If we end up with those types of expectations, I think that that's kind of what creates a lot of issues surrounding like narcissism and ego. It's these expectations of like, this should happen. And then if it doesn't, you're really going to be disappointed, or, some people take that as a great kicking off point. Like, okay, this is what, I don't know. I think expectations and reality are critical, and nothing should happen to you. We don't deserve anything. Like I'm blessed way beyond what I deserve, but that doesn't mean that like anything in life, like I should be able to eat lunch. Okay. Well, that's crazy. I could have a heart attack right here and not eat lunch. So I'd say never live in should, but live in like what could be.
Yeah, that's really good. Now, additionally, while you're in college, so you're producing videos, but you also get started creating WordPress templates. Now, today, WordPress is widely talked about, but maybe at that moment in time, it wasn't as commonly known about. So, talk a little bit about that.
Yep. So I was launching, I realized anytime you're going to be launching a business, you have to have a digital footprint. You have to exist online. And I, through a ton of, further experimentation and failure and whatnot, just figured out WordPress, which powers 34% of the entire internet. It's the most popular framework on the planet, and it's the #1 ranking factor as it relates to comparative platforms in Google. So if you're on WordPress, you've got something like a 90% greater chance of getting ranked than on any other platform, just because of how well it SEOs and all of that. And so, but I was going out launching these businesses, whether it was like a video production portfolio, or I launched a little membership site to sell videos for like $20 a pop. That it was actually intended for churches too. They could buy them and play them in church and that kind of thing. So I was building all these projects and businesses, and there's power in that technology, and really what it launched everything I'm doing right now because of how difficult it really was to do that. I didn't, have the ability to hire expensive programmers or designers or any of that. So I was buying themes and plugging things together and duct taping this tool to this thing and crossing my fingers and hoping that it works. And then like payment integrations and autoresponders and all these things. And became this behemoth that it would take me 3 to 6 months to launch what I could envision in my mind, really on old school, what I call old school WordPress now. And it doesn't mean it's not powerful. It's extremely robust and powerful, but it's probably one of the most technologically difficult things to harness specifically for you, because it's not cookie cutter. It's like a baby stepping into a tank or something and trying to operate it. It's a complex machine that's powerful in the right hands, and you have to have that ability, but it can be difficult. So really that spurred in my mind ideas like, if this is difficult for me, it's probably difficult for a lot of people.
Yes. Now, as you're graduating from college, once again, you've had a few years of entrepreneurial mindset. You started kind of growing a business. It sounds like you come from a similar background as me, where both my parents were W-2, and all of a sudden I'm stepping into a job right out of college where there is zero guaranteed money. My dad's like, "Are you sure you know what you're doing?" And I'm like, "I'm not sure I know what I'm doing, but I like what the opportunity could be."
Mm.
So, for anyone that's listening that comes from a background where maybe entrepreneurial ideas, or even going into a career that's commission based, right? It's not a guaranteed salary, is abnormal. Talk about getting through that and saying, "Hey, I know you love me. I know you want the best for me, but the best doesn't always mean the guaranteed paycheck."
Mm. Yeah, everyone's got to judge that for themselves. I used to take a really hard stance that everyone should be an entrepreneur, and then I learned pretty quickly that not everyone should be an
Not everyone
entrepreneur,
should be. Agreed.
frankly. So it's not like the golden ticket of success. It's just not. I mean, it's the upside up to a certain amount of income is greater on the W-2 side. It's like you've got security, especially for your family if you need that, or maybe your skill set is only leverageable up to a certain point in time. So the upside is greater up to a certain amount on W-2, but the upside beyond that only exists in owning your own business that you can operate. But it also means the pressure is far greater for you on that side too. So it's risk and reward. You could lose everything, but the other side of the coin is, hey, I could also lose my W-2 job, right? And that could disappear in a day. So for me, I've always decided I'm unhireable. I've had what I call my 21 jobs. I've been employed in 21 jobs leading up to now, and realized like no one can hire me because I'm the visionary type. I'm the creator, builder, executor. Like, let's go do this new thing. and not so much the W-2. But I can tell you, my family is, if anyone here has had that, but the rest of your family is not. I'm probably the only entrepreneur on both sides of the family, really.
Yep.
They definitely think you're crazy when you're first starting out. But I always kind of have this little, maybe I keep it more internal than anything, but I kind of have this like, I'll show you, like, I'll show you
Yeah.
what I can do. And I can outwork anyone. I can outlast. I can outthink. I can outcreate. I can choose to do whatever I need to do to create that. But they also get to see the failures as well as the good.
Yep.
And end of the day, like, yeah, we've had, if 10% of what you do is successful and the other 90% is failure, that's still a pretty good batting average. You only need a couple good home runs to do really well. And if nothing else, I think I don't allow others to drag me kind of back down into like hey, don't do this. You need to be safe and secure. I'm like, okay, well, you haven't tasted what it's like on the good side. Like, and if you had, you probably would join me in my insane pursuits.
Yes. Now, for you, as you're graduating, once again, your enjoyment for theater and production continues on, and you start working in production of shows and movies and things like that. So, talk a little bit about how you even got into that from the graduating standpoint. I know that's a very competitive industry.
Oh yeah, I mean, in the video production side, it really ended up. I moved much more into internet marketing pretty much right after that. But I worked at a local TV station, and I got to work on some big shows. Like I shot an episode of American Pickers, for example. So I ended up being shown on TLC and Netflix, and all of my other commercials got to be aired on every possible network and all that kind of stuff, which was really cool for exposure. And it was
Yeah.
actually one day I had already graduated, and I was still living in a low income, government subsidized housing in Branson, Missouri. And I still remember that little spot in this little spare bedroom, at the time. And someone saw one of my spots, one of my commercials, and they said, "Hey, come on in. And like, we just need someone to help us all the time. Like, do
Mm.
you want a job?" And I was like, "Oh man, like I would love a job. I'd kill for a job at this point." Right. And they actually ended up offering me, at the time, it was like $8,000 a month or something, just to work on all their stuff. And they
Yeah.
thought I was like a full blown agency, like production house front and back. No, it was just me pretty much in the closet. But I led that for quite some time until, and then they really learned to realize that it was just me doing everything front to back. I just learned every aspect of the production process.
Yeah.
Um, and then that literally changed everything for me. They brought me in full time. They're doing a lot of internet marketing, but it took me probably 2 years to figure out even what they were selling. It was like, they're like, "Hey, we've got this opt-in page. We need like a VSL for this thing." And they have all this jargon and things that they were I was like, what is an opt-in page? Why would you want to collect information? Why would you want someone's email? Like, why would you sell a product for $37 that's worth 500 or more? Why would you do that? Why are we making these videos and doing all these things? So it was like almost like a paid internship in learning high converting direct response marketing specifically.
Yeah.
And over that, just people seeing I happen to be one of the only people in the internet marketing space that could create the caliber of production. So I kind of married the two. It was like high value production meets direct response internet marketing. And I lived in this tiny chasm where multiple companies, at the same time, like I was the only person who could do it, or the only person specializing for that niche. So that really opened a ton of doors. Got to do a lot of traveling, and that's very cool too. And then that essentially taught me how to sell virtually anything online,
Yeah.
which is through sales funnels. How do you capture someone's attention? How do you convert them into becoming a lead or a hot prospect, someone who wants more from you? How do you convert them into an initial transaction? How do you send them to another transaction? How do you increase the average lifetime value? And how do you make them a raving fan for life? So through video production is just the means of communicating that, and marrying that with direct response marketing. It's led me to where I am right now.
Yes. So as you're working for them, once again, you're honing your skills, right? You're getting paid to figure it out.
Right.
That's a big deal. Now, at what point through that did you realize, all right, this has been a great learning experience, and so thankful for, once again, the income I'm making and the job opportunity and all the learning, but now it's time for me to go out on my own?
Boy, I remember that day, and it was pretty terrifying. I think there's some pretty cavernous decisions and pivot points in an entrepreneurial career, but I was still kind of own my own business, even though I was kind of being a contractor for all these companies. And so it was sort of on my own, but also sort of under the umbrella of security and safety. And,
Yeah.
like they weren't going down. So I was like, okay, good. I'm ready to go. But ended up, it came down to a head where there was one client, kind of eliminated all my other clients. I was already heading towards really wanting to do my own thing. And there was one primary client that I ended up becoming a partner in, and we started to grow, but then it kind of took a big, there's a big shakeup in the industry, which just crushed it down to almost nothing. It'd be like the comparison of like a stock market crash for that particular business.
Yeah.
So it drove it down to almost nothing. And my income went from, I don't know, 20 or 25K a month or something down to literally zero.
Wow.
And that I realized, like, it's not about your taxation model or your employment model that matters. It's about, do you have control of your own life?
Yeah.
And that's what I realized. I didn't have control. I was still dependent, even as a contractor or a business owner, still dependent on other people's actions or markets or decisions to impact me. And I remember that day I was pretty terrified. Had one kid at the time. We have three now, three boys. And it was like, man, this is really scary. This is an intense feeling of like, I have no income. I have no idea where it's going to come from. Had a little bit of savings, and thank goodness for being frugal. Thanks to my parents for teaching me frugality.
Yeah.
And so I was a little bit like, okay, I'll be okay, but I've got to get something going. I have to get something going. And then really that's what led into realizing, man, if I'm an entrepreneur who wants to build things at any point in time, and every time I do that, I'm stuck with this barrier of not being able to, I don't want to hire expensive designers or tech teams or do a bunch of custom coding on things. I don't want to duct tape all these platforms together. And I had done that probably a dozen times. Every business, do it for clients, or you do it for the production company or the consulting practice or all those things. It's like, I wanted to launch these offers online and do it in a way that can convert, but without all this stuff, that it becomes a mangled mess. And it's like just holding on for dear life by the skin of its teeth. And so I realized, wait a second, I used to build on WordPress, but I've got all these other tools and whatnot, that like sales funnels and payment integrations that are tough to put it. Why don't I just, but they're direct response and they work, right? It's the psychology versus the technology. So why don't I just marry these two things together? And so it sparked the idea of this concept, which is now DropFunnels, where I brought on probably 3 developers, just sunk most of the money I had left into developing a platform that and a designer, a couple small people. I was like, guys, I got this vision. Let's go tackle this thing, to build one platform where you can do everything in one and get ranked in Google in the way that only WordPress can allow you to do that. Build sales funnels. I had done some courses. I wanted to host courses in there. I wanted to host videos in there. I want a 2-way text message with leads in there. So it was like the fantasy land of the dreamland of everything I wanted to do, and said, okay, I don't care what it takes. We're putting all of this into one system, and happened to be that it solved my own problem and it helped solve a lot of other people's problems at the same time.
Yes. Now, just kind of talking through that, I think so many people out there say you should get rid of your full-time job and just jump straight into entrepreneurship. So that way you don't have anything to fall back on, because if you do have something to fall back on, you may not fully pursue what could be the business. Other people say, well, until you are having really a business model that is sustainable and generating revenue for you, you probably should just go ahead and keep that job and do the business as a side hustle, right? I mean, however you look at it. And in my opinion, I don't necessarily say one's right or wrong. I think it depends on you, right? What's your mindset? So talk a little bit about that for you. It sounds like you were a little bit forced into starting the business just because of the way, your income had changed, but talk about that for you.
Yeah, it's that classic tale of, Cortez burning the boats, right? And where when your back's against the wall, you have no choice. And so I think there is power in that for the right type of personality and the right mindset. If you were to just throw any general employee type who likes the safety and security of working for a company, and you put their back against a wall, it's like fight or flight in like not a good way, right? And that's like putting pressure that might crush them and it won't be good.
Yeah.
Whereas I find that when someone's like, I'm going to burn boats, and the intentionality is to do that. And that's my goal is I'm saying I'm removing optionality to fail as a mechanism to help me to propel. It's a choice of mine. It's not like I have to do this or I die kind of thing. Right. But it's like, I'm choosing to burn those boats. And that's what they did. That's the point of that kind of thought exercise. So I think if you are entrepreneurial and you have that desire to own your own stuff and control, I think it's about control, right? It's about control and freedom choice of freedom. Like, so I can choose to do what I want. And I can control the incomes and the outcomes of whatever that is. If that's the case, I think the sooner you can get out from your job, the better. If you're inevitably going to do it anyway, it's like, if I want to go get 6-pack abs, I can go start next year, or I can start today. And if it's an inevitability, it's like, why would I waste? I need to compress time. I need to eliminate variables, eliminate friction, and just go and run for it. And so for the person who subscribes to that model, great. I think a lot of people who are starting off into a side hustle and whatnot, it doesn't make sense. And I've seen people fail miserably by burning their job and say, I've got this little fidget spinner and I'm going to go take it out to the world and Kickstarter and see if this thing works, and go all chips in. It's like, well, do you recognize that you're kind of basing your decision on swinging the bat one time and you have to hit a home run? It's right. Like, that's too attached to the outcome and not attached to the process. So that's why I say attach yourself to the decision-making process of building in the option for failure, that can be there, but you'll rise beyond that. But again, if you know for a fact that you want to do this with your life and it's something that propels you, not that I have to have the money now, it makes sense to do that. Otherwise, it's like, there's nothing wrong with having a weekend warrior side hustle, doing something out of your basement, a little business or what. There's nothing wrong with that at all. And eventually it could take off, but I'd say don't sacrifice your family and your health insurance and well-being on a gamble,
Yep. Nope. That's awesome. Great advice. Now, one thing you mentioned in some of the interviews that I've heard you do is one of the best things that came from production of shows and commercials was the fact that maybe if you're the top show on Netflix, you don't have to market yourself, right? They'll call you, they'll bring you in. But if you're not that show, then you really have to be out there promoting yourself, marketing your show to get the opportunity to be on. So talk about having that, marketing skill and maybe some moments where you had a win there and how that's translated into, your business today.
Yeah. I mean, I would actually postulate that every top show is actually just a giant marketing machine. And like they didn't get there by accident. Yeah. It doesn't necessarily happen by just one networking connection or something, or it's like it happened to just trick, the algorithm to get to the top spot. I mean, that's really, really rare. They are self-producing and nonstop marketing maniacs, like nonstop. Stranger Things. I mean, look at what is just built into this probably $1 billion empire by this point, is this incredible cult following that's been built over time. Yeah. But they spend millions a month on advertising and like big displays and like getting the actors to go do interviews and all that. It's a nonstop machine to do that. So I'd say anyone who's in any type of business, your number one job is not as business owner. It is as chief marketing architect. You are a marketer by default. And actually, same is true about people trying to climb the corporate ladder. You are marketing yourself at all times. And your offer is either really good and people are going to buy it, or it sucks and they're not going to buy it. And you're always improving that. And yeah, there's, people can be hired just because of cool things that they've done. Maybe they were employee 10 at Facebook and it's like, okay, they did that thing. Let's go get them in to do that. There's some of that clout and whatnot, but even that's a hook. It's a feature. It's like, so even us as human beings, we're constantly marketing ourselves. It's how you get married. It's how you date. It's how people hire you. It's the friends that you make. You're always making offers in the marketplace in that way. So I'd say the more marketing you're doing, the better, no matter the size of your business or what you're doing in life, you're always doing it anyway. So I'd say do it well.
Boom. Love it. Now, as DropFunnels gets started, like you said, hey, I knew what it was capable of doing, and I was really excited about that. But now I needed to make other people aware of
Mm.
what was possible and what it was doing. So talk about kind of getting the engine running, and the as the saying goes, right, the rocket ship, uses 90% of its fuel getting up there, right, in the last 10% to go. So talk about really, ramping up at the early phase.
Oh boy, that's such an important topic. I always say going from 0 to 1 is as hard as it is to go from 1 to 10.
Mm,
Going from 0 to 1 is so hard, right?
yeah.
Getting initial validation, getting initial customers, especially if you don't have a ton of experience or connections, or no one believes in you yet, or you don't have a huge
Right.
marketing budget, or there's no seed funding or capital. And, I bootstrapped everything in my life up to this point. So I've never taken capital. And so with that, it's like, man, you got to do more with less. You got to work harder with fewer resources. So what I did is what I call the backwards launch. And I tend to do things pretty contrarian. I guess you could call me a disruptor in that way. I like to think outside of the box. How can we tackle this issue differently than just dumping money at it, right? How can we
Yeah.
outthink what we're doing with our strategy? So what I did is I launched the whole thing backwards. I actually sold it before it was even built. So I was in kind of some marketing communities, people who knew generally who I was, but I wasn't famous. No one knew about this or any of that. No leg up in that way. And I said, guys, I've got this vision for this platform that's going to help you to do X, Y, Z. And we're all kind of working on the same things. Who wants to try it out? I'll give you grandfathered in lifetime access for $37 a month.
Mm,
And actually, I think about 100 people joined in at about that. So that actually paid for some of the initial development.
yeah.
$3,700 in the pocket. It took me probably 2 or 3 months to get the first beta version launched. Gave that to them, and then what I did, I was like, okay, so we have some initial momentum, right? You go out there and you sell it first, and people are willing to put money in your pocket to vote for this future version that's going to come out. You have validation, and
Yeah.
not your friends and family. It's people outside who have no bias towards you, and they're being completely objective. They will vote with their dollars on what matters. And so I try to make them an irresistible offer, $37. I'll never raise your rates, and you'll get the highest tier plan of everything we ever do, right? So, and actually now that's up to $299 a month or whatever, right? So like some people are still locked in on that to this day. So with that, I thought, okay, we need to build snowball momentum on top of that. So sell it first, build the MVP or the beta version of the product, and get it into their hands for feedback, right? It doesn't have to be perfect. You don't need to wait years or overdevelop on anything, really. You need to get it in their hands and have them start using it, because their feedback is what you directly take, because it's their opinion that matters, not yours. So they're going to tell you what they want more of, or what things don't work, or what doesn't matter to them. And then really to build on top of that momentum, I would just take that the monthly recurring started just to grow from like 3K a month, maybe 5K a month, maybe 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And it was just pushing this, overwhelming them with value. So it was like, it would be stupid for them to cancel. Right. And so it was really pushing the boulder uphill initially. And then, to ultimately grow to, I think our first couple hundred subscribers, it ended up being like launching an affiliate program to help them to go share it and build some distribution channels in that way. There's a lot of other things that we've tested, but I think the best thing a person can do when they're trying to launch something is go sell the thing first before it even exists. Yep. We live in a Kickstarter economy. People are willing to vote with their dollars, and they're going to tell you if they want it or not. Why would you spend 2 years developing something that no one's even going to want? It's like it's heartache waiting to happen, right?
Yeah.
So that's my thought. Build backwards, sell it, build the MVP, then just get feedback iteratively and develop and improve from there. And your product will build itself.
So we're talking about it in the context of your business going to market with a specific product. But I think, to anyone or to, the listener right now, this can be applied to a lot of phases of your life. And that is, you can try and come up with the absolute perfect plan. There's no glitches in whatever it is you're trying to do, right? It could be your workout routine, whatever it is. You got the perfect thing set up, but then all of a sudden you're going to have something happen where your back hurts and you can't work out for 2 days. And so now, because you spent so much time creating this perfect plan and you just didn't start doing the workout or whatever it is, right? It derailed it. So talk a little bit about, it's important to spend time planning, right? You don't want to be, negligent here and just, have no plan and just kind of throw something at the wall. You want to have thought behind it. At the same token, it's not about making sure everything is picture perfect. It's about, to your point, getting in front of the people that it matters to and getting the feedback, because that's what's going to make the outcome perfect.
Yeah, if I were to put this on a general scale, and people can subscribe to whatever model serves you best, but I think the general population will spend about 80% of the spectrum planning, 15% of the spectrum building, and 5% selling. Mm-hmm. Like getting it out to market to the actual, right, or at best, like 5% at best of their time. And because it's comfortable, we love being at the kitchen table, coming up with ideas and all those things and planning, here's what we're going to do and strategize this and all that. I think if you were to flip it on its head and say, as a thought exercise, if nothing else, to say like, no, I'm going to spend 80% of my time selling, 15% of my time planning, 5% building, or whatever the commensurate prorations work best for you, right? I think if you were to completely shift the model from being inside the comfort zone, inside the cave of just like doing your thing where it doesn't affect anyone else and it's not actually getting out there, shift it and force yourself to do the uncomfortable part first, and then the building and planning becomes fun, right? But yeah, I'd say if you're generally, and I've got a hardcore stance on this, I think if you're planning for anything in life more than probably 3 to 6 months, you're overdoing it. It doesn't even take 6 months to plan a wedding. You could plan it in a month. What is that? Parkinson's law.
Yep, that's right.
We're gonna compress to the time we allow ourselves. So sure, give yourself a year to launch a business. You'll launch it in a year. Give yourself a week. It's going to be out in a week, right? Oh. So we fill the set. We're the fishbowl in the fish tank. We're going to fill the space that we're allowed, and we get to create that. So I think spending too much time in planning's important. Going out with intelligence is important, but validating those ideas in the marketplace is what's going to confirm whether that was a good idea or not over planning it or over developing, and spending years on something.
It's really good. Now, the second one, this is just random. Why $37 a month?
Yeah, so there's a lot of pricing psychology that some of the real godfathers of modern direct response marketing have tested, and they're testing price points all the time. It's a good little hack for people. If you're selling something under $500, if you end it in a 7, it tends to be one of the highest converting numbers as it relates to pricing. So 7, 17, 27, 37, 97, 147, 297, et cetera, right? So if you just add a 7 to it, you're going to sell infinitely more at 147 than you will at 150, and even more than 149, right? So if I can sell 2 of this versus 1.5 of another price point, it makes sense, right, to do that.
Yeah.
If you're selling, it's a pricing strategy hack because it's so imperfect. It's like this weird number. If it's the perfect number around, like, okay, it's $500.
Yep.
Think, well, there's definitely a margin in there. There's definitely profit being built in, and it flips our mind into a different category of pricing. Whereas if you just go 497, it doesn't break over that search filter, right? And we keep it within a lower category. And it's also imperfect in the sense that, like, you could do like 493 or 490, maybe even 495. A lot of stores will use 5, but it's about like how often people see those particular numbers, and 7 tends to be a pretty rare number for pricing things.
Yeah.
So that works. If you're doing higher price points, I recommend going for 800s. So instead of selling something at $2,000, go sell it at 2,800. You're actually going to sell more of it. Instead of $3,000, the perfect number of $3,000.
Yep.
Go sell it for 3,800, and there's no effect in conversions at all with those different price points. Nominal at best. We're talking like minuscule amounts of difference, where you can be increasing average cart value or lifetime customer value by just playing with some of your pricing. So I always tell people, test your price points, try it out. 7s are great for under 500, and go for that 800 rule if it's over 1,000.
There it is. There it is. Now, for any business, you kind of talked about how incrementally, the price per month has gone up. So I'm sure that validates your idea that the business is going well. At the same token, I also find oftentimes for people that have had companies that have reached levels of success, there's maybe one or two clients that, whether it was just you appreciated the validation from the specific type of company or from the person that run it, is someone that you really admired or respected, and their validation really helped you solidify in your mind, all right, yes, this is something that people are really enjoying. Do you have any stories about that in your journey that really solidified, all right, this is viable and this is going to market and really important?
Boy, and I think I would look at this through the lens of still consistently testing and failing all the time, right?
Yeah.
I I think if we're seeking external validation, it's also a road of getting beat up pretty hard. And I think it's always a struggle. I struggle with it probably weekly around, feeling like developing my own identity to be internal, or like what I know is believable and true about me. What is true for me is not dependent on other people's validation to confirm that.
Mm.
But so I would say that's why my friend Seth Ellsworth says this thing. He says, you want to make identity-based choices and then choice-based identities, right? So
Mm-hmm.
meaning that you create your choices and decisions based on who you are, not necessarily on what other people believe or think or know about you. That said, there have been a couple pretty cool moments that people have recognized our brand and what we're doing is like, wow, that is like the de facto, that's a great tool, that's a great win. And some of that is really good stuff. There's also the side, and it goes back to living in should, that when I launched it, there were particular people that I thought, this person should love this. Like
Yeah.
they'll probably, they're gonna dig this and make this the main thing. And they usually don't,
Yeah.
right? It's the people that I believe should have loved it and adopted it and used it. They didn't. So I think it's important to stay open, but not dependent to other people's validation, whether they're highfalutin or just general people.
Yes. That's awesome. Well, Jordo, any other specific, high or, pivotal moments that stick out in your mind as, you've gone on the journey to where you're at today that stand out that, really were pivotal, as you reflect on where you're at today?
Yeah, boy, it seems like every day there's a new moment. If you're having kind of a rough day and things are not going very well, I try to consistently think, okay, I'm going to learn from this and not do it again. And every day is new experiences around that, whether it's an issue with a team member or with a customer. And then that's always the question is, anytime the things go wrong, we'll typically do a post-mortem of that. And I think we learn more through when things go wrong than when they go right. And you get more rights once you figure out what you're doing wrong. And that
Yeah.
only happens through, seriously, like no one can give you their life experience in a book and you just avoid all those mistakes. I mean, they can warn you about them, but they can't, force you to not touch the stove, right?
Yeah.
And any mistakes that can go wrong, they will, right? If it can, it will. So I think some of the biggest moments have been just in like, all right, what did we do wrong there? How can we avoid that for the future? How can we treat people differently? How can we serve them better? How can we ensure that we perform at the highest level or help faster or do more, and always trying to improve to avoid those. And that's actually helped to keep us probably in out of a ton of hot water. When it comes to growing a company, there's always someone, staring at you, trying to be vindictive or affect you in a negative way. But I'd say as long as you're serving people really well, always learning from your mistakes, and constantly innovating one step ahead of everybody else, like it's a recipe for a win.
That's awesome. Well, I want to say thanks so much for hopping on and sharing your story and the pivotal moments. I mean, it's kind of fun to think back to, going to Hard Work U and, learning that work ethic and starting in building commercials and WordPress and, all the different things that have now led to this business that you're running. And, it's super exciting to see where you're going to be going. So, kind of last two things would just be where can people find you on social medias? And, from a business standpoint, if they were wanting to, learn more about, how would they reach out to inquire?
Sure. Yeah. If anyone stayed through this the entirety of me jabbing for an hour, then I'd say I'd be happy to give my email to anyone here. So it's Jordan, Jordan at dropfunnels.com. So Jordan at dropfunnels.com if you have questions or you need some encouragement. And then, yeah, we have dropfunnels.com as our primary platform to, help small businesses and entrepreneurs to grow online. And we got a great supportive Facebook group as well. But I mean, who knows? Maybe we'll start another, maybe we'll start another social network or something in the future. And we'll come back on the show and talk about that.
I can't wait. Well, Jordan, thanks again so much for being on, my man.
My pleasure.